Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on something that's a pretty big deal for anyone running a business these days.
Yeah, you got it.
Mitigating third-party risk and compliance.
Hmm.
We all work with outside vendors, contractors, you name it.
Right.
But how do we make sure those relationships don't end up creating a ton of risk?
Mm.
Legal, financial,
Mm.
reputation even.
Yeah.
We've got some source material here laying out 10 pretty advanced techniques.
Yeah.
And I got to say, some of this stuff was news to me.
It really is beyond just trusting your gut these days.
Yeah, no
The
kidding.
risks are just too complex.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Enhanced due diligence.
EDD.
BDD.
Yeah.
This sounds pretty basic.
Right.
But we're not talking about just running a quick background check here.
Yeah.
This is serious, in-depth investigation, especially when a vendor is going to be handling your most sensitive data.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is that strong EDD often utilizes what's called a risk-based approach. This means the intensity of your due diligence efforts should match the potential risks involved.
Got it.
Think about a vendor handling sensitive customer data versus a company that delivers your office supplies.
Right, so you don't need a full-blown FBI investigation for someone delivering staplers.
Exactly.
But when it comes to sensitive data, we need to know everything.
You got.
Who are the real players behind the company?
Mm-hmm.
What's their financial health like?
Yeah.
Have they had any security breaches in the past?
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the financial health piece.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine partnering with a vendor on the brink of bankruptcy.
Ooh.
It can disrupt your operations and even expose you to legal liabilities.
Right.
A thorough review of their financial statements and credit ratings is a must.
And in today's world, you absolutely cannot skimp on cybersecurity assessments.
Oh, for sure.
Data breaches are making headlines every other day.
All the time.
Before signing on with any vendor, you need to know how they handle data security.
Mm.
Are they following industry best practices?
Yep.
Do they have a solid incident response plan?
It's like making sure the building you're moving into has solid fire safety measures in place.
Oh, I like that.
You wouldn't want to be caught off guard in case of an emergency, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, so we've done our due diligence.
Okay.
We've checked all the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But the relationship doesn't stop there, right?
Right. That's where continuous monitoring comes into play.
Okay.
Think of it like a fitness tracker for your third-party relationships.
Interesting.
You're constantly monitoring vital signs, looking for any red flags that might indicate a problem.
So it's not a one-and-done deal.
No.
We're talking about regularly checking in, making sure things are still running smoothly.
Right, and this is where technology can really help.
Oh, yeah.
Automated tools can keep tabs on things like financial stability, regulatory changes, even news articles, and social media mentions.
Wow.
This allows you to identify potential issues in real time before they snowball into a major crisis.
It's like having an early warning system in place, constantly scanning the horizon for potential storms.
Exactly. And remember, a vendor's risk profile can change over time, especially those operating in volatile industries or regions.
Right.
You might have a fantastic vendor today who suddenly becomes a major risk down the line.
Oh, that's scary.
Periodic reassessments are essential to ensure your risk mitigation strategies remain effective.
Okay, so continuous monitoring never stops.
Nope.
We've got due diligence,
Yeah.
ongoing monitoring.
Mhm.
What's the next layer of protection?
This is where those rock-solid contracts come in,
Okay.
or contractual safeguards.
Right.
These define the relationship, outlining everyone's responsibilities, and importantly, what happens if someone drops the ball.
So if due diligence is like checking someone's references and continuous monitoring is like keeping an eye on them,
Yeah,
this is like setting the ground rules for a healthy relationship.
precisely.
Okay, I like that analogy.
These contracts need very specific clauses covering risk management, data protection, and compliance requirements. For example, you need to establish your right to audit their operations.
So can we check their books,
Mm-hmm.
their security protocol?
Yep.
Without that transparency, you're essentially flying blind.
Exactly.
And what happens if a vendor makes a mistake that ends up costing you money, or even worse, damages your reputation?
That's where indemnification clauses come in.
Okay.
They essentially shift the financial burden of a compliance violation or data breach from you to the vendor if they're the ones at fault.
So if they mess up, they pay up.
Right.
Makes sense.
It's a crucial layer of financial protection.
But here's one I hadn't thought much about before.
Okay.
The exit strategy.
Oh, yeah.
What happens if you need to end the relationship?
Right.
How do you untangle yourselves without creating a new set of risks.
You absolutely need a plan for this.
Really?
This includes figuring out how to handle data transfer and retention,
Okay.
especially if there's sensitive information involved.
Right.
Remember, breaking up with a vendor can be just as risky as starting a relationship with one.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got due diligence,
Okay.
monitoring,
Yeah.
solid contracts.
Yep.
But how do we manage all of this on a larger scale?
That's where having a third-party risk management framework comes in.
What's that?
It's about taking a strategic, big-picture approach rather than just reacting to issues as they pop up.
Okay.
Think about it. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, right?
So this framework is like the blueprint for managing third-party risk across the entire organization.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
It helps you integrate third-party risk management into your overall risk strategy, prioritize your efforts, and allocate resources effectively.
Makes sense.
One key element of this framework is a vendor risk rating system.
Okay.
This allows you to categorize vendors based on their risk level so you can focus your attention where it matters most.
Now let's move on to something I know is on everyone's mind these days, cybersecurity and data privacy compliance.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
With all the high-profile data breaches we've seen, this has to be top of the list when it comes to third-party risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One tool that's becoming increasingly important is the Data Protection Impact Assessment, or DPIA.
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 Oh, okay.
This is a structured way to evaluate how a vendor might affect your data, privacy, and security.
Right.
Think of it like an environmental impact assessment, but for data.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So before we even start working with a vendor,
Mm-hmm.
we need to understand their data handling practices,
Right.
security measures,
Yeah.
and whether they comply with regulations like GDPR and CCPA.
Precisely. And understanding these regulations is key.
Oh, yeah.
GDPR, for example, has strict requirements for data processing and transfer,
Right.
which can have significant implications for your third-party relationships.
Yes, this is a big one.
You need to ensure your vendors are compliant, especially if they're handling data from European citizens.
No cutting corners there.
Nope.
Speaking of making sure things are up to code, how do we really know what's going on behind the scenes with our vendors?
You got it. It's all about audits and inspections.
Okay.
Think of it like a home inspection before you buy a house.
Okay.
But instead of checking for leaky faucets and faulty wiring, we're looking for compliance gaps and security vulnerabilities.
So we need to bring in the experts, the independent auditors, who can assess our vendors' practices against contractual obligations and industry standards.
You got it.
That could include financial audits,
Mm-hmm.
compliance audits,
Yeah.
and of course, cybersecurity audits.
And remember, it's not just about checking boxes.
Right.
A good audit will go beyond the surface, digging into processes, interviewing staff, and reviewing documentation to get a true picture of the vendor's compliance posture.
And we can't forget about penetration testing.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Ethical hackers trying to break into your systems to find vulnerabilities.
Right.
It might sound scary,
Yeah.
but it's much better to discover those weaknesses before a real attacker does.
Absolutely. And that's just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to ensuring vendors are walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Right.
You need a comprehensive audit trail and ongoing monitoring to provide that continuous assurance.
Now, all this talk about audits and security measures makes me think about what happens if, despite our best efforts, something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's where third-party risk insurance comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even with the best precautions, you can't eliminate risk entirely.
Right.
That's why it's critical to ensure your vendors have adequate insurance coverage to protect you from financial losses in case of a breach or other incident.
It's like that extra layer of protection just in case things go sideways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine a data breach happens because of a vendor's mistake.
Uh-huh.
Their insurance could help cover the costs of notifying affected individuals,
Mm-hmm.
providing credit monitoring services,
Right.
and even dealing with legal fallout.
Exactly. It can be the difference between weathering the storm and facing a financial catastrophe.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Due diligence.
Monitoring contracts,
Yeah.
frameworks,
Mm.
audits,
Yeah.
and even insurance.
Right.
But there's something else we need to talk about, right? Something that goes beyond just following the rules.
You're right. We need to talk about the ethical aspect of third-party relationships.
Okay.
It's not just about complying with laws and regulations. It's about doing business with companies that align with your values.
It's like asking yourself, would I be proud to be associated with this company?
Exactly.
Even if they're technically not breaking any laws, are their practices ethical?
Right.
Do they treat their employees fairly? Do they care about the environment?
These are all crucial questions to consider.
Yeah, they are.
And they're becoming increasingly important to consumers and investors as well.
For sure.
People want to support businesses that are doing the right thing.
And that's where the supplier code of conduct and ethics comes in.
Right. It's a document that outlines your expectations for vendors on issues like anti-corruption, human rights, and environmental sustainability. It's about making sure your values are reflected in the companies you choose to work with.
And don't underestimate the power of a strong supplier code of conduct.
Yeah.
It can not only mitigate risk, but also enhance your reputation and brand value.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
Okay, we're making great progress here. What's next on our list of techniques?
Well, let's talk about training and awareness programs.
Okay.
Even with the best policies and procedures in place, they're only as good as the people implementing them.
Right.
Everyone involved in vendor management needs to be aware of the risks and know how to mitigate them.
So we're talking about specialized training programs to ensure everyone is up to date on the latest best practices, right?
Exactly. For employees involved in vendor selection and onboarding, training might focus on due diligence procedures,
Okay.
contract negotiation, and risk assessment methodologies.
Makes sense.
This equips them with the tools and knowledge they need to identify potential red flags early on.
So it's about empowering them to ask the right questions and make informed decisions about which vendors to partner with.
Exactly.
And for employees who work directly with vendors on a day-to-day basis, training might focus on data security protocols, privacy requirements, and incident reporting procedures.
This ensures they know how to handle sensitive information responsibly and what to do if something goes wrong.
It's all about creating a culture where everyone understands their role in mitigating third-party risk.
Precisely. And remember, training isn't a one-time event.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
It needs to be an ongoing process to keep everyone up to speed as regulations change, new technologies emerge, and the risk landscape evolves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about due diligence, monitoring, contracts, frameworks, audits, insurance, ethics, and training. What's the final piece of the puzzle when it comes to mitigating third-party risk?
The last technique, but certainly not least, is incident response and crisis management.
Oh.
Even with all the precautions in the world, things can still go wrong.
True.
And when they do, you need to be prepared to respond quickly and effectively.
It's like having a fire escape plan.
Exactly.
You hope you never have to use it, but it's crucial to have one, just in case.
You need to know who's responsible for what.
Right.
How you're going to communicate with stakeholders, and how you're going to contain the damage.
Got it.
A robust incident response plan should include procedures for things like data breach notification, regulatory reporting, and legal counsel engagement.
And we can't forget about crisis communication, right?
Yeah, that's a big one.
How do we communicate with our customers, investors, and the media if a third-party incident affects our compliance?
Absolutely. Transparency and honesty are key in these situations.
Yeah, I think so too.
People are more likely to forgive a mistake if they feel like you're being upfront with them.
Okay, so we made it through all 10 techniques.
We did.
That was a lot of information, but I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, for sure.
There's so much more to explore when it comes to mitigating third-party risk.
You're right, there is. But I think we've laid a solid foundation here.
Yeah.
Covering the key principles and strategies that any organization can use to manage these complex challenges.
I agree. And I'm excited to continue our deep dive in the next part.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be discussing some practical tips and real-world examples of how companies are successfully mitigating third-party risk and even turning it into a competitive advantage.
Okay, sounds good.
Stay tuned.
All right.
All right, we're back. And I have to say, even I'm feeling a little overwhelmed after covering all those techniques.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's clear that mitigating third-party risk is a huge undertaking.
It definitely is, but that doesn't mean it's insurmountable.
Okay.
The key is to break it down into manageable steps and focus on what's most important for your specific organization.
Okay, that makes sense. So for our listener who's thinking, this is great, but where do I even start? What's the first step they should take?
I'd say the first step is to truly understand your organization's risk appetite.
Okay.
What level of risk are you comfortable with?
Right.
What are your absolute deal breakers?
Got it.
Once you have a clear picture of that, you can start building a tailored strategy that meets your specific needs.
So it's kind of like figuring out what kind of house you want to build before You start laying the foundation.
Exactly.
Do you want a cozy cottage or a sprawling mansion?
Right.
Your risk appetite will determine the scope and complexity of your third-party risk management program.
Exactly. And remember, your risk appetite might change over time.
Oh, right, good point.
As your business grows, regulations shift or new technologies emerge, it's important to reevaluate your risk assessment periodically.
Okay.
And adjust your approach as needed.
So it's not a set and forget it kind of thing.
No.
It's a living, breathing process that needs to evolve along with your business.
Precisely. And it's a process that requires collaboration across different departments. Legal compliance, procurement, IT security, even business units.
Wow. So everyone
needs to be on the same page.
Okay.
And working together to effectively manage third-party risk.
It really is a team effort.
Yeah.
And speaking of teams, we've talked a lot about the importance of training.
Yes.
Can you give us some concrete examples of what that training might look like?
Sure. For employees involved in vendor selection and onboarding, training might cover due diligence procedures, contract negotiation, and risk assessment methodologies.
Okay.
This equips them with the tools and knowledge they need to identify potential red flags early on.
So it's about empowering them to ask the right questions and make informed decisions about which vendors to partner with.
Exactly.
And for employees who work directly with vendors on a day-to-day basis, training might focus on data security protocols, privacy requirements, and incident reporting procedures. This ensures they know how to handle sensitive information responsibly and what to do if something goes wrong.
It's all about creating a culture where everyone understands their role in mitigating third-party risk.
And don't forget about ongoing awareness campaigns to keep third-party risk top of mind for everyone in the organization.
Oh, for sure.
This could include regular newsletters, internal webinars, even gamified training modules.
I love that.
Me too.
Gamified training.
You know, it's interesting. We've been talking a lot about the negative side of third-party risk. The breaches, the lawsuits, the reputational damage.
Right.
But I'm wondering, is there a positive side to this as well?
That's a great point. When third-party risk is managed effectively, it can actually lead to stronger, more resilient relationships with your partners.
Really?
This can translate into improved efficiency, innovation, and even cost savings.
So it's not just about playing defense. It's about playing offense, too.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important message for our listener. Mitigating third-party risk isn't just about avoiding negative outcomes.
Right.
It's about creating positive opportunities.
Absolutely. And remember, we're not just talking about large corporations here.
Oh, okay.
These principles apply to businesses of all sizes.
Got it.
Whether you're a small startup with a handful of vendors or a global enterprise with a complex supply chain, you need to be thinking about third-party risk.
And the good news is you don't have to go it alone.
Nope.
There are a ton of resources out there to help you build a robust third-party risk management program.
That's right. Industry associations, consulting firms, software vendors, even government agencies.
Wow.
They can all provide guidance tools and best practices.
So it's about doing your research, finding the resources that are right for you, and building a program that fits your specific needs.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to learn from others' experiences.
That's a good point.
There are plenty of case studies and real-world examples out there that can provide valuable insights and help you avoid common pitfalls.
That's a great point. Learning from others' mistakes can save you a lot of time, money, and headaches down the line.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the value of networking and knowledge sharing. Connecting with other professionals in your industry who are facing similar challenges can provide invaluable support and guidance.
All right, we've talked about the importance of building a strong foundation, staying ahead of the curve, fostering a culture of compliance, and finding the right resources. But before we move on to real-world examples, I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
Okay, I'm all ears.
What if, instead of viewing third-party risk as a burden, we started to see it as an opportunity? An opportunity to build stronger relationships, improve our processes, and even drive innovation.
I love that reframing. It's about shifting our mindset from risk aversion to risk optimization.
Exactly. Because when we view risk as something to be managed rather than something to be feared, we open up a whole new world of possibilities.
And that's what makes this field so exciting.
I know, right?
It's about finding that sweet spot where we can balance risk and reward, compliance and innovation, and create a future where our organizations can thrive in this interconnected world.
Well said. Now let's shift gears and take a look at some real-world examples of companies who are nailing this whole third-party risk management thing.
Okay, let's do it.
We'll be back after a short break. We're back and ready to dive into some real-world examples of how companies are turning these third-party risk management techniques into action.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about the theory, but seeing it in practice really brings it home.
Absolutely. So let's start with an industry known for its complex supply chains and strict regulations, pharmaceuticals.
Good choice. Pharmaceutical companies rely on a vast network of partners, from research labs and manufacturing plants to distributors, and every step of the way, they're dealing with incredibly strict regulations to make sure their products are safe and effective.
It's a high-stakes game for sure. So how are they navigating this complex web of third-party relationships?
Well, one thing we're seeing is a much greater emphasis on proactive due diligence. It's not just about ticking boxes anymore. They're going beyond the basics and really digging deep into their partners' quality management systems, track records, and even their ethical practices.
So they're not just looking for partners who can get the job done. They're looking for partners who share their commitment to quality and compliance.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to walk away from a partnership if it doesn't meet their standards.
Wow.
They understand that the risks are simply too high to compromise.
That makes sense. Another thing I've noticed is how pharmaceutical companies are leveraging technology to streamline their vendor management processes.
That's a huge trend across all industries, really. But it's especially important in pharmaceuticals where the stakes are so high. There are specialized software platforms that can automate a lot of the heavy lifting, like risk assessments, contract management, and ongoing monitoring.
So they're freeing up their teams to focus on the strategic side of things rather than getting bogged down in administrative tasks.
Exactly. And it also helps reduce the potential for human error, which is always a concern when you're dealing with complex processes and sensitive information.
Right. It's all about building a more efficient and resilient system. But technology is just one piece of the puzzle. I'm also seeing a shift towards more collaborative relationships between pharmaceutical companies and their vendors.
That's a really interesting development. They're moving away from that transactional arm's-length approach and instead working more closely with their partners to identify and mitigate risks together.
So it's about building a culture of shared responsibility and accountability.
Precisely. And it can actually lead to some unexpected benefits.
Oh, fair.
Well, for example, by working closely with their manufacturing partners, pharmaceutical companies can gain valuable insights into potential supply chain disruptions and proactively develop contingency plans.
So they're turning a potential risk into a strategic advantage.
Exactly. And that's what risk optimization is all about.
I like it.
It's about turning challenges into opportunities.
All right, let's shift gears and look at another industry that's constantly evolving: financial services.
Good one. With the rise of fintech and the increasing interconnectedness of global financial markets, financial institutions are facing a whole new set of challenges when it comes to third-party risk management.
I can imagine. It's a fast-paced and constantly changing landscape. So what are some of the key issues they're grappling with?
One of the biggest challenges is simply the sheer number and diversity of third parties they rely on.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. They're working with payment processors, cloud providers, data analytics firms, cybersecurity consultants, and the list goes on.
It's a complex ecosystem.
Yeah.
So how are they managing this intricate web of relationships?
One strategy we're seeing is a move towards more centralized vendor management programs. Instead of having different departments managing their own vendors in silos, they're creating central hubs that can provide a more holistic view of third-party risk across the entire organization.
So it's about breaking down those silos and creating a more unified approach.
Exactly. It's about having a single source of truth for all things vendor-related.
Got it.
This allows them to identify potential conflicts of interest, streamline due diligence processes, and track performance more effectively.
And I imagine data analytics plays a big role here, too.
Absolutely. Financial institutions are sitting on mountains of data, and they're starting to realize the power of that data to identify and assess risks more effectively. They can use analytics to spot patterns and trends that might otherwise go unnoticed.
So it's about using data to make smarter decisions about vendor selection, contract negotiation, and ongoing monitoring.
Precisely. And of course, cybersecurity is a top priority for financial institutions, especially in light of the increasing sophistication and frequency of cyber attacks.
Hmm.
They're demanding higher security standards from their vendors, conducting more rigorous audits, and implementing stricter access controls.
So they're not taking any chances when it comes to protecting sensitive customer data.
Not at all. They know that a single data breach can have catastrophic consequences for their reputation and their bottom line.
Right. It's all about building a culture of security awareness and ensuring that everyone, from the CEO to the newest intern, understands the importance of safeguarding data.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting against external threats.
Mm.
They also need to be mindful of insider risks and have robust controls in place to prevent fraud and data misuse.
It's a multifaceted challenge for sure.
Hmm.
But it sounds like financial institutions are rising to the occasion.
They are. They're investing heavily in technology, training, and expertise to build more resilient and secure systems. And they're starting to embrace innovation, exploring the use of emerging technologies like blockchain to enhance security and transparency in their supply chains.
So it's about finding that balance between innovation and risk management.
Precisely. It's about leveraging the power of new technologies while also mitigating the risks that come with them.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the 10 essential techniques for mitigating third-party risk to some inspiring real-world examples. I'm feeling energized by all the amazing work that companies are doing in this space.
Me too. It's clear that third-party risk management is no longer an afterthought. It's a strategic imperative that's front and center for organizations of all sizes and across all industries.
And that's what makes it such a fascinating, dynamic field. It's constantly evolving, and there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. And that's what we love about the deep dive, right? It's about exploring complex topics, challenging assumptions, and finding those aha moments that help us navigate this ever-changing world.
Exactly. And I think this deep dive into third-party risk management has been a perfect example of that. We've gone beyond the surface level, really dug into the nuances, and hopefully provided our listeners with some actionable insights they can apply to their own organizations.
I hope so too. Remember, mitigating third-party risk isn't just about checking boxes and complying with regulations.
It's not.
It's about building stronger, more resilient organizations that can thrive in this interconnected world.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. Until next time, stay curious.